Welcome to Raptors Weekly for the week of May 25th. The offseason is underway. For the Raptors, it started a little bit earlier than we had liked. But the podcasts continue. The podcasts continue because people have got to go to work in the morning. They got to listen to something. And this week we're trying something a little different. Instead of having the regular old Andrew Will rotation, we're gonna hit the comments section and get on board one of the longtime readers of the site, one of the longtime commenters of the site, Yertu Damkule, also known as Trevor, also known as Yertu Damkule. How's it going, man?
Not too bad. Yourself?
Not bad, man. So I remember like you and I talking like years back and agreeing on a couple things. And one of them was just how much we hated Bryan Colangelo. You remember that?
I do. I have fond memories of our ability to connect over a common enemy.
Yeah, Bryan Colangelo was the common enemy, and in that centerpiece was Andrea Bargnani, who we remember frustrating us to no end for years on end.
It was that tantalizing talent that never really kind of bore fruit in any kind of result.
Yeah, were you ever at some point, even for like a moment, maybe like 5 minutes even, you said to yourself, man, this guy might be like a perennial all-star? Did that like brief moment ever occur to you? Like, or was it always like, this guy's a bust?
No, I think I was optimistic at least the first probably couple of years. I think he showed signs that he could be sort of like the revolutionary type of player that they had hoped he would be. You know, the stretch four. When you look at it now, I mean, stretch four is sort of a common language. It's, pretty much every team has one now. But when he came into the league, I mean, bigs were supposed to play, still, I mean, at that point, still, closer to the basket type of thing, back to the basket in the paint. And, I think there was, traditionally there's always been big guys that can step outside and shoot and stretch the floor, but there was always a bit of a understanding that they would also perform some big man duties, protect the paint, grab a rebound once or twice a quarter, those types of things. And it didn't seem like the bar was set all that high for Bargnani to do those things, and he just didn't do them.
Yeah.
And you can only extend so much rope to a guy who's going to hurt you more than he's helping you. So for all of the offense that he gave in terms of like, floor spacing and threes and that kind of thing, which are great, he kind of gave them right back at the other end of the floor and then some. So, I mean, after a certain point, you just start to wonder, okay, well, is it ever going to happen for him? Is he ever going to become more than this, one-dimensional bomber?
Yeah.
And then when that, we all remember the 13 games. But
the 13 games. Was it January or December, January?
I think it was right around, New Year of that year. I don't even remember what year it is. It was a long time ago.
I think 2008, I think it was. Was it? Jermaine O'Neal got injured.
09.
Yeah, Jermaine O'Neal got injured, and
it was this, the push for the All-Star kind of bid. If he keeps this up, is he a perennial All-Star? And it's like, well, that's the question with a lot of guys. If you're good enough to make the NBA, Terrence Ross can put in 50 because he's a good player because he made the NBA. If you made the NBA, you're not a joke. You can play, but can you do it every day? Can you go in and out, every game and put in the same effort that you need to kind of get those results? And we saw with Bargnani. I think that was unfortunate too, because I think he hit a period of time. Was that the year where he kind of had a couple of injuries and he was playing well? And
that was a year. Yeah.
You legitimately felt bad for him because it felt like he was kind of turning a corner, and even though he still wasn't great, defensively and rebounding. He was, making more of an effort that way, and you did legitimately feel bad for him because you could tell he was frustrated with the injuries and things. But after that, it was just never really saw that again, on any kind of consistent level with him. And I think the same is true now. He's in New York. I mean, it's not like they had a lot of better guys ahead of him. And, he had some good games this year.
Yeah. So making some like jumping to the present state of the Raptors. I remember there was a lot of hype around when Colangelo got hired, and it soon kind of dwindled off. For me, the big warning sign was not Bargnani because it was a weak draft, but the signing of Jason Kapono after we had lost to the Nets, because that just told me that he just read the series completely wrong. I didn't understand why we lost because he went for offense when the problem clearly was on the other side of the court. But now we're in the Ujiri era, and much like Colangelo's, it started off with great enthusiasm. Ironically enough, because he dumped Bargnani, and then he pulled off the lucky trade, which even he conceded, turned the Raptors' fortunes around last year. But like this summer for Ujiri, it's kind of not make or break, but this is where things are like expected of him, where he's supposed to fix a problem. I think so far he's kind of been given the leeway or the benefit of the doubt, and he can do no wrong. In the last summer it was all about re-signing free agents. The summer before that it was just getting rid of Bargnani. But this summer he's got a legitimate issue on his hand, and he's got some decisions to make.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I think the thing with leeway is he did earn some of that. So I think we're over that. The new guy is here, and let's give him a chance to see what he can do. I mean, he made some moves, and they were positive moves for the team. So he's kind of earned that. Okay, good. We feel like you're on the right track in terms of like player movement. But it's always a progression, right? It's like what happens next? How do you build on what you've done before? And like when you refer to the lucky trade, I mean, obviously it probably turned out differently than he was anticipating from a record standpoint. I think probably differently from what most fans were expecting too. When you got rid of Gay and you kind of built this new bench unit. But yeah, this summer it's the first time in a long time where I've really felt like I don't know where this team is going, other than I know that without some either really significant and kind of almost like 180 turns in terms of player development, and I'm talking specifically of some of the younger guys, Ross and JV, without some really upticks in terms of like what they actually produce on the court, the team's really kind of heading towards that dreaded, the treadmill. And I know there's probably people listening to this that are rolling their eyes and thinking of, Tim W. and the treadmill, but it is the worst. Like that feels like I'm kind of concerned for the first time in a while with Ujiri here that if he's kind of wants to see more out of the core that he has, that's where we're kind of going. But I mean, it might be a case where he's kind of trapped in terms of what he has in terms of assets. We're heading into a period of time, this coming off season, next off season, the off season after that, where every team is going to be flush with so much money that it becomes cap space is irrelevant, at this point. Even this year, because people, teams will kind of overpay this year and, worry about it later kind of thing.
Yeah.
They'll pay the tax for a year if they need to, knowing that everything's going up the next year. So they'll overpay for the first year of a guy just to get the guy. And so, like, any cap space that teams have now are, they all kind of have this artificial cap space now, as long as they're willing to kind of bite the bullet on the first year type of thing until everything kind of rises up. But, I mean, I'm concerned just more from, what does he do? Are the players that he has now that he's planning on building around, are those players that you actually can build around? And if they're not, do you trade them? And if you do, what do you reasonably expect to get back? Like, what does a DeRozan, say, fetch on the market? Not that I'm suggesting that he'd be moved, but it seems pretty clear that the team, if he's here, feels that he's, one of the core pieces of the team. And it kind of goes back to, if DeRozan is your best player, can you win a championship? This kind of best player on a team.
This kind of has some. Again, I'm not saying he's the same guy. Like Chris Bosh comes to mind, right? He was one of those guys that was a really good player. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I was thinking about that before we kind of went on. Was like, it feels now like this team feels a lot like that Bosh team, that Bosh-led team that had the 2 playoff appearances without success in the playoffs. And that was when the whispers kind of, well, not whispers, I think there was some always talk, like legitimate talk about Bosh as the guy, as a franchise kind of player. And the question, even then was, if Bosh is your best player, can you win a championship with that team? And it's not like, if he's not, that's the end of it. It just means that you need to work around it. And, Bosh was not. He could not be the best player on a championship team. I think he realized that. I think that was part of his major impetus for going to Miami was, I'm not good enough to be the best player on a championship team, but I can certainly be the second or third best player on a championship team.
So now when you look at the roster, and you're in Ujiri's mind, and you got, in terms of assets, you have DeRozan, you got Lowry, and you got two young guys in Valanciunas and Ross. And you'd have to think Ross's trade value is pretty much nil, especially after he had that. It's a minor bone spur surgery, but still, I mean, he played horribly in the regular season, in the playoffs, and then he had surgery. So you can't see him fetching more than like a second round pick at this point.
Yeah.
But what are the chances? Like, what are the chances that Valanciunas turn? Like, what did you make of Valanciunas' handling this year by Dwayne Casey? Like, were you on the train that was like, oh, we're shocked and appalled by the way he's getting treated by the coach, or were you like, yeah, he's an uncoordinated big man who hasn't learned fast enough? Like, where were you in that spectrum?
Well, I think unless you see things a lot differently than I do, which is entirely the case. I think it's a bit of both. I'm not sure Casey is sort of like a great mentor or a great coach for a young player. He comes with a lot of, I guess, defensive kind of oriented.
Allegedly.
Well, I think the thing is, like, you're only as good as the players you're putting out there. And I think that the hope, for the fan base was he would be able to take some of our weaker defenders and bring them along.
Except he made them weaker.
I don't know if that's the case, if that's him, or if that's just, Valanciunas getting exposed for what he is a guy who isn't able to pick up the teachings. Mm-hmm. And, maybe, there's always two sides to everything, right? So, I think people, they look at the raw numbers for Valanciunas and looking at it, just taking the numbers at face value. He had a good year. Not as good probably as the fans wanted. And so but still, it's a good, solid statistical year, but still his minutes aren't what fans probably want them to be. But yeah. I have to kind of trust that Casey has a better feel for when he should be playing, and if he's got somebody else playing instead of him, that I hope there's a legit reason for it, whether it's a particular one-on-one matchup or the style, teams going small, and we just can't do that. Forever, the Raptors, whether it's been Casey or Mitchell, have always acquiesced to the other team. Yeah. The other team dictates the style, and the Raptors match. We never are the team that dictates whether the game is going to be played fast or slow, big or small, and that I think goes to talent. You can only dictate the matchup if you have superior talent when that matchup is created, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm frustrated with Valanciunas because I think he's a better player than what he showed, and even what the stats show. But I think he's their best trade asset at this point. But I shudder to think what you'd have behind him. Like, if you're trading him, you need to get a big man back. Yeah. Well, what big man are you going to get back in a trade that's any better than he is?
You'd have to package a bunch of things to do that, right?
Well, that's just it. Then it becomes this big deal, and you're bringing in 3 or 4 teams type of thing into it, and you're a dozen players kind of going places, and then maybe you're just really shuffling the deck chairs.
How much do you buy that? Last week on the podcast we had Will, and he kind of. He kind of likes to make the point that the NBA is heading a certain direction when it comes to big men. You mentioned the stretch four earlier. How much do you think the game has changed? Where is it still conducive to Valanciunas' talents?
Well, like a big man that can rebound and defend and score in the post will always have a place in the league. It doesn't help him that he's hesitant to stretch himself outside the paint and be that guy that can hit a 15-footer. He's always looking to use it as a fake, but if you never shoot it, your fake is worthless.
And hilarious.
And it is pretty hilarious because you could, it's like, hey, fake drink, right? But style of play is kind of cyclical right now. We're kind of in a more, stretch four kind of thing, or the 4 position has kind of gotten a little bit smaller and more mobile and more able to shoot from outside. But it's not just, everybody is more able to shoot from outside, right? It's not just particularly to big men. It's like, your 2 guards that used to be, limited to 18-footers, what DeRozan basically is, used to be the norm. Now it's kind of everybody, or 3s especially, everybody can step back behind the line and stretch the floor and shoot 3s. And if you can't, you're really at a pretty big disadvantage. I think that's probably the main reason why Ross was in the lineup so much, was that they needed him in there to stretch the floor. Besides Lowry, he's really the only reliable three-point shooter they would have. I mean, I guess Vasquez can, but Vasquez is a bit of a different kind of player. He needs to kind of, be set and kind of have a lot of space and time to get his shot off. It's not Ross. I feel is more of like come around, peel around a screen and catch it, go up, take a shot with a hand in your face kind of guy. Vasquez is more of that, kind of a set shot, needs a lot of space or whatever. And I don't really like the idea of Vasquez playing. I like him more as an actual backup point guard than playing with Lowry as a two. But anyway, kind of got off on a tangent. But I mean, going back to Valanciunas, like I do think he's valuable. I think what he does is valuable. If you can't rebound in the NBA, you're pretty screwed. I mean, you see the value now in the Cleveland series with Tristan Thompson, who's a limited offensive player, but he brings value. He has a place on a contending team, vying for a championship because he can rebound. He has a very specific skill set, and he's very, very good at it. And I don't think a couple of years ago, the idea of Tristan Thompson being one of the key players on a championship caliber team would have been something that really entered the conversation. But you work at it and you're really good at it, and he's not, he's not a negative defensively, which is, Valanciunas basically gives you some good offense in the post, and he gives you good rebounding in the post. It's the defense that's lacking. And the ability to kind of step away from the basket.
Yeah, I don't know how much you subscribe to the whole advanced stats thing, but like if you look at his rim defense numbers, they've always been quite good actually. How he defends, shots within a 5-foot range, or however they calculate that thing. His defensive percentage is always quite good. So that's what's puzzling to me is that I was quite surprised by his minutes management this year, and how I thought we didn't give him enough chance to show his defensive worth, and we always kind of were quick to take him out and put a smaller lineup in because we were kind of afraid to see what would happen if we leave him in there. Or I think the leash with him wasn't as long as it needs to be. And if there's one thing Bryan Colangelo was right about, it's like foreign big men take some time to develop in this league, and I don't know if we've given Valanciunas enough enough rope in that sense, but.
Yeah. Oh no. I mean, it would bother me if he was traded because to a degree, even Ross being traded would bother me just because you're trading him at such a low point in his value. I think Valanciunas is a bit different. I think you'd still get value for him. I would rather him be on the team than get back the kind of player who he'd likely actually bring back.
Yeah, and I do. Yeah, I'm with you on that one actually. On the Ross thing, surprisingly, so is that I don't want him traded because he does one thing really well.
His role needs to be defined better. He needs to come off the bench and be a 3-and-D guy.
Yeah,
that is his career in the NBA, and the sooner he gets that and buys in and becomes that lockdown kind of defender, because he has all the ability in the world to do it. He can be a Bruce Bowen light, maybe, kind of guy. I think he's a better shooter than Bowen was at this stage of his career, and he's not the defender, but I mean, defense isn't easy. I mean, it takes a long time to learn how to not let yourself be picked. It takes a long time to learn how to do that. It's not something, and you need to be taught it. And whether he's not getting that, or it's not sinking in, or he thinks he's something more than what he actually is. But I don't like the idea of trading him because you're not getting anything back for him, and he does as in the right role. I think he actually provides some good value. I just don't know if you can I understand why he was in that role. I just think you need somebody better.
His Terrence Ross on Draft Express, his who his best case? You know how they have like a best case and worst case projection?
His best case?
Yeah, his best case.
I don't know.
Take a guess what Draft Express might have said.
J.R. Smith.
You're not that far off. Jason Richardson.
Jason Richardson, yeah. Similar type of player, yeah. That would be perfect. I'd love that. Yeah. If you can have a Jason Richardson career, I mean, that guy played a long time and was a good player for a long time. So I'd buy that for $1 for sure.
Yeah. Let's move on from JV and Ross, the youth of the team, and And talk about Kyle Lowry a little bit here. One of my issues with him this year was his management. Not so much with him, but how he was managed. I think for a guy who's been injury prone throughout his career, the heavy toll of minutes that he played, 35, 36 a night, even when it became clear that he wasn't 100%, it bit us in the playoffs because we rested him too late, and then we brought him back too early. And then when we brought him back, we just wore him down. I think the last 4 or 5 games of the regular season, I think he played an average of 35 minutes a game in games that were pretty much meaningless. And in the playoffs, it showed. He was not even close to the player he was. Forget in November, December, even in January, February, he was just out of sorts. And a lot of it has to do with who he was guarding, John Wall and Bradley Beal. But next year, Lowry's going to be 30, going on 31. What's the Lowry that you expect next season? Is it the guy you see in November, December, or is it the Lowry you've seen in years past? Like, what do you project him as right now, and what do you think the Raptors should do with him?
Well, I mean, from a what should they do with him? I mean, I don't think there's anything that they can or should do with him. From a movement standpoint, he's on the team. He's the starting point guard. I think his what he contributes is, I think his contract is probably one of the best in the league. Just even with all of the things that kind of went wrong at the end of the year, I think more than anything, I think he was just mentally just out, just exhausted by the time the playoffs rolled around. I just think he'd had such an up and down year, frustration with the injuries. I think he got overworked when DeRozan went down, and the offensive burden kind of shifted almost entirely onto him, and he was playing heavy minutes, but it wasn't just the heavy minutes, it's just the heavy involvement. It's just every possession, it's like, I don't have the stats in front of me, but his usage rate during the time that DeRozan was out must have been amongst the league leaders type of thing for that particular period of time. So I just think, his playing style, his body type does seem to be a bit more prone to injury. And I think, as much as the fans were frustrated with how the season kind of went down, starting January-ish type of thing, I think he was frustrated with that as well. And I don't know if it was frustration with his own, the injuries or his bad play or just, not making the right decision time after time, it seemed. Or not having the help that he thought he needed, on the roster type of thing. And whether, maybe, at the trade deadline, you stand pat and you say, okay, I'm sending a vote of confidence to my team, but maybe the team's thinking we need something here. We need an extra little something to carry the load here. And, maybe he felt like, they needed to make a move and gear up for the playoffs, and they didn't. Maybe it was just too much, or maybe it was just, a lot of bad luck or bad timing of things kind of, happening all at once, and he just had a bad time to run into a really tough matchup. I mean, Washington, we should have probably realized that they weren't the same team as their record had indicated.
No. Were you prior to the whole playoff starting, were you in the, I'm hoping that you were in the let's face Milwaukee camp than Washington.
Yep. Although, considering how they played against Chicago, I don't know if the difference, if the outcome would have been any different.
Well, we wouldn't get swept.
I don't think we would have gotten swept. You're right. But Washington was going to be a tough matchup. They, where we were strong, they were as strong or stronger. Mm-hmm. Our strengths is their strengths and that type of thing.
So just rounding off the Lowry talk for a bit. Yeah. Is Kyle Lowry an All-Star next year?
I don't know. I don't know if it matters. Yeah. That the whole, I don't know. The Raptors, we seem to be really intent on setting these little insignificant goals. 50 wins, Atlantic Division champions, getting a guy into the All-Star game, winning slam dunk. Really, who gives anything, The goal is championship. Yeah. Right? You build your team to win a championship. And now, it's like...
Well, let me rephrase. Does he get to the level we saw him this year?
Oh, okay. Does he play at an All-Star level?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think he does. Yeah. Because I think he's that quality of a player. Mm-hmm. And I think, obviously... Was
that your opinion of him? Aside, was that your opinion of him before he came to Toronto? Or was it, when he came to Toronto, did you think that this was where he would become an All-Star, or were you like, this is a risk?
Well, I think there's always risk. I was happy when he came in. I was pissed off because so much energy had been focused on trying to get Nash, and that ended up in us getting Fields, and the guy that we should have been going after in the first place could have been gotten for what he was gotten for without having to take on Fields, and those are the types of things that Colangelo did, where he's like, I'm the smartest guy in the room, I'm going to do this and screw somebody else over, and oops, it didn't quite work out. And I mean, not that getting Nash would have worked either, obviously, because it didn't work out, for him or for the Lakers. But the guy he shouldn't have been targeting Nash in the first place. So I mean, the whole thing, how it ended up, it ended up well. It was kind of a fortuitous thing to get Lowry at the end of it for pretty much nothing. I think there was a draft pick, and
it was a pick.
I can't remember the name of the player that went, or was it just a pick?
I think it was just a pick. But my favorite thing about the whole Fields thing was I love how Nash used the Raptors to get himself a better deal with the Lakers. And I think that was the sad part about the whole Nash deal. The sad part was actually going after him, getting Fields with the poison pill and all that stuff. But seeing the Nash use the Raptors, was kind of sad.
Well, I don't know if you're a GM, like, why do you put yourself in a position to be leveraged for another team? And maybe he thought it, like, if you don't think he's the right guy from a basketball standpoint, and I guess, maybe a lot of this is hindsight thinking, where, we know now that he was, not the same player, or, prone to injury, and, that's how he was going to derail him. But for me, it would have been, why look older? Let's look at a younger guy who's established and can be had, for relatively nothing versus, giving up a lot for.
And there was an article written by Michael Grange, who Sportsnet has deleted since, and they will never publish it again. And when the whole Nash thing was going on, he wrote this huge piece about how it's better for the Raptors to just sit back and forget about winning and enjoy a great Canadian in the twilight of his career. And I thought that was probably one of the most bullshit articles ever written in Toronto sports media. And I actually contacted Sportsnet. I was like, can I get a copy of that? And they're like, yeah, we don't have it.
To me, like, Nash is an icon, and I think you're never going to take away what he did. And as a Canadian, I think we should feel as proud today as we always have. And I think it's a good thing he's going to be connected to Canada basketball for however long he wants. And I think it's exciting to look at what Canada basketball can become over the next few years. But at that age, it never made sense, I don't think, for him to kind of be like the target. The Raptors weren't alone. There were a lot of teams chasing after him because he had good years leading up to that, before the move into the Lakers. Right?
Yeah,
he wasn't washed up then. It just, that's why I'm saying hindsight, maybe like, we kind of dodged a bullet there.
No, I think even at the time you knew this was a bad move, and I think. We talked about Stockton Malone as being one of the great pick and roll combinations ever, and you and I grew up watching the Jazz and those teams. But there's something to be said about Nash and Amare Stoudemire. Those two were after over the last 20 years, in my memory at least, after Stockton Malone, Nash and Stoudemire are right up there.
Yeah, but I think you can say that with Nash and like fill in the blank.
I don't know. I think Stoudemire and him were something.
Yeah, Stoudemire had
like Nash and Gortat. I don't think so. Like Nash and Stoudemire.
But obviously Gortat's not the same player. But he made Gortat a better player than he was at the time. He kind of brought him along. But you're right. Stoudemire. For a big man, he had great hands. He could take that either 1 pound dribble type of thing and just get into the lane and just get out of the way type of thing.
People sometimes forget how good Stoudemire was. Like he had some years in Phoenix where he was dominant.
Yeah. For size, speed, leaping ability, finishing around the rim, he was amazing. That's the thing. We always a player's career we kind of assess better, several years after they've retired, and we've kind of been able to blend their career from start to finish a little bit better. Like I think Tracy McGrady's kind of getting into that realm now, where he's been away from the game long enough that we're not only remembering, the bad ending, or seeing this old kind of fat Tracy McGrady with the Spurs type of thing, as a bench warmer. But I mean, when you look back at his career, he was probably one of the best or top 3 players in the league for almost a full decade.
Yeah,
I think people kind of forget that. They see like, oh, we never made it out of the first round of the playoffs. They don't bother looking at the numbers and show that his numbers in the playoffs were better than his regular season numbers over his career. You know what I mean? Like, so over time, we kind of have a better appreciation, I think, for the full body of a career than just what we remember most recently.
Well, it's like anyway. It's like Gary Payton and Shawn Kemp. I remember from the Sonics. I mean, those guys never had great playoff success, but they were phenomenal players. And like one of my favorite players of all time is Shawn Kemp, just because he was just so dominant and so fierce. But when you look at his playoff record, it's not that great. Losing to the Nuggets in the 1-8 matchup, and he made it to the finals and lost to the Bulls. But great player. And Tracy McGrady, or Allen Iverson for that matter, who only had like brief playoff success, went to the finals once. These are players that like aren't necessarily have rings on them, but have just been tremendous players.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I think we kind of, for the players that are bound for the Hall of Fame, I think we remember their full careers better when that talk starts up and people start reminiscing about the Iverson highlights or the McGrady highlights. How many, that 8 points in 6 seconds or something that McGrady scored that one time.
I think it was more than that. I think it was like 14 and like 18. It was crazy.
It was something. Yeah, it was just like back. It was like more like Miller's remembered for his game in the Garden where he put in like 9 in a few seconds.
Yeah, what people don't remember is Miller, like in his next game, was like 3 for 18. That's forgotten.
Anyway,
let's just come back to a couple of more topics before we sign off. The Raptors decided to fire like 2 other assistant coaches, Bill Bano and Tom Sterner, and decided to keep Dwayne Casey. Now, you and I don't know what happens behind the scenes, what value assistant coaches bring, but apparently Bill Bano was a guy who was tasked with developing Valanciunas. He was his like personal coach, kind of. And Tom Sterner, nobody really knows. Like, what? How do you read this? You keep the head coach there, but you hire his assistants for him. Doesn't that have like a bad smell to it?
Well, I mean, like you said, I don't. There could be a lot of things going on that we're not really kind of privy to, and everybody with a job has a certain mandate, and all I can think is that they didn't meet the mandate that was set out for them. And if the job of one of them, not Stern or the other guy, this is how much I care. I can't remember Bano or Blano or whatever. Is to develop JV, and they didn't feel he developed the way that he should have. Well, that's you didn't meet your job mandate. And the thing is, like, it's an assistant coach. So I mean, it's not. I mean, that's usually the assistant coach is basically where the next crop of head coaches is coming from. Probably not the assistant coaches from the Raptors are being bandied about as the next Budenholzer type of thing, right? But that's part of your the legacy of your franchise. Maybe, I don't know.
All right, no, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, I get it. I just felt this was kind of like let's put the blame somewhere. Placate the fans a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, it was like, Casey's signed, right?
Yeah.
He's got how many? You got 2 more years?
No, he's got one last year. Then he's got a team option for the next one.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're not going to fire Casey, then I don't really know if there's a reason. I was not impressed with what he did in the playoffs because it's embarrassing from a personal fan standpoint to get outcoached by Randy Whitman, but whatever. Like that keyboard, the clipboard gif.
There's 2 of them, right? There's 2. Like there's one where like he can't get the clipboard right, and like he had to turn it like 8 times.
8 times.
And then there's this other one where like he's trying to draw up a play, and Gortat just like snatches the playbook out of him and like starts drawing it up himself.
Well, the one where he's turning the clipboard over and over, he does it like I think on the 4th time. There's a guy. If you look at the GIF or the video of it, there's a guy in the background, like one of the guys, and he looks like he's just trying not to, like he's rolling his eyes or something. He's just like, you just look at his face, and his face is like, what the is going on here? Like, it's hilarious. But anyway, but I mean, it felt like if you're getting out coached by Randy Whitman, and maybe it's a case of talent trumps all. Maybe they were healthier. I don't know. They played better. There's no doubt about it. They had more X factors in terms of guys who are going to step up into the situation and kind of perform. And maybe Lowry was kind of left on an island a little bit and felt he had to do too much because he did not play well. And maybe it was, putting too much pressure on himself or him not being able to deal with the speed of the guys he's got to cover, or who were covering him. Lowry isn't. It's not. You don't need a whole lot of strategery here to defend Lowry. I mean, he's kind of. He's a bulldog kind of player. He's going to be physical with the ball. He's going to try and get into the lane or create space for him to get shots off, type of thing. So if you can take away, it sounds kind of stupid because it's the same kind of thing with anybody. But if you take away what he wants to do, he's gonna get frustrated more often than not. He doesn't have a lot of the other natural athletic skills to kind of do something different. If you take away what Wall wants to do, Wall can still get around you because he's super fast.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Lowry's first step is not going to get around a competent defender type of thing, right?
Yeah.
He needs help. I don't think he had enough help in the playoffs.
No. Yeah, I think you raised a good point earlier that maybe some of the frustration was with a lack of a move at the deadline, where there were some pretty obvious holes, 3-point shooting, rim defense that that Ujiri chose not to address and chose to use the rest of the season to evaluate what he had, and maybe some of that frustration seeps over. That's normal. I think a lot of players. So, but before you round off, man, one last thing I gotta ask you. If you look at the Ujiri's policy, he's been on record saying that the deep bench is what he stacks youth with, and right now we got two guys on there, Bruno Caballo, who I guess is a huge unknown at this point, and lots of athleticism, but nothing much more. Then you got Lucas Nogueira, who's how do you classify these two? Do we ever? How far away is Lucas Nogueira from actually playing a significant minute in the NBA?
I would say he's probably a couple of years away. If ever. The thing is, we, as fans, we kind of focus on the guys on our team, and we want to hope for the best. We want them to be the diamonds in the rough. More likely, they're probably never going to be. Either one is probably not going to be, this, the hidden Kevin Durant in terms, in Bruno's case. That's very unlikely. Mm-hmm. It's possible that he could become, with consistent minutes, with proper training and development. He could become, gradual. I don't think he's at the point where it's all of a sudden it's going to click and he's just going to become this, stud, mm-hmm. contributor type of thing where he's getting, 25 minutes a game and he's shooting, 50% from the floor type of thing. If it happens, it's going to be an overtime kind of thing. I
hear you, man.
Draymond Green might be a good example of that, where you put the work in. The expectations aren't really high for you, but you kind of force your team to play, force your coach to give you more minutes, and you earn those minutes, and you kind of continue your development that way. I think they both have enough raw skill to kind of stick.
Well, I don't know about that, man. I don't know if Bruno Caballo has any basketball skill.
Bruno?
I've
seen
shoot. I've seen him play D-League, man. I've seen him play D-League ball. Trust me. He's short on skill. He's got a lot of athleticism, but
we're supposed to believe, Harsh. Come on.
Yeah. And
we're supposed to hope and believe.
The reason I brought up Bebe is because when you look at the type of body he has, what his strengths are supposed to be, he's kind of like the ideal player you want to have coming off the bench to give you defense and kind of disrupt the rim, grab some rebounds, disrupt the offense. That's the kind of guy we want. And I look at him if we could just speed this guy up a little and maybe he could do something, he might be of value. But then again, when I go into these thoughts and I'm what is wrong with me? Why am I expecting so much from this guy who has shown nothing so far?
Because it's, we just want to believe. Yeah. Right? I think that's what it comes down to, right? You just want, you want him to be, we don't have a backup 7-footer. Yeah. Maybe he can be our backup 7-footer. Yeah. Then we don't have to go get one. Yeah. I want him to be that backup 7-footer. I want him to be able to get 18 minutes a game and provide, backline defense and 6 block shots per 36 minutes. We want him to be that guy. I mean, there's nothing wrong with wanting it. I mean, expecting it is a little bit different. I don't think anybody expects it. I mean, I think we all kind of, after a certain period of time. I mean, guys are what they are. I mean, as goes back to Ross. We want him to be a certain thing. He's approaching that point where he's almost, where we can almost say he is what he is. You know what I mean? You only get so many years.
Well, but earlier you said he could be a Bruce Bowen, but now you're saying he's which one is it?
Well, I mean, that's the thing is we want him to be a Bruce Bowen. He could be a Bruce Bowen, but he's getting close to not getting the chance to be the Bruce Bowen because he's not playing well enough to get enough minutes. If you don't get the minutes,
he's getting a lot of minutes.
Well, no, but yes, he's gotten a lot of minutes. He's gotten more minutes than he probably deserved in some cases, and maybe not enough, and maybe it's a timing issue. Like I don't know, but he feels like he can't afford too many more stretches of play like what he had in the playoffs. And if it was injury related, then he gets maybe a bit of a clean slate to start the year next year. And we see, but I mean, how many more months of if he repeats his performance from the playoffs in the first 20 games next year, how do we feel about him then? Or do we even want him on the floor at all? Right? Can you afford to have him on the floor, or is he too much of a detriment?
Okay, hey man, thanks for coming on. Long-time reader, Trevor. Long-time reader, back from the Arsenalist.com days. And glad you could make it, man. And we'll have you back again. And hey, do you own any We the North gear?
We the North gear, no. Oh. I have one item of actual apparel, and it's my wife got me a Steve Nash jersey from when he was with the Suns, probably must be almost 10 years ago now. That's the only piece of official NBA merchandise I own.
All right.
I'm in Halifax. You don't see. I mean, I can see when I wander through Sport Check every once in a while. I see some We the North stuff, but I don't own any myself. No, I don't. I don't feel like I don't like to be like a kind of billboard. I don't like to have a lot of advertisements on me. So everything's kind of plain with me.
Cool. Thanks for coming on, and we'll have you back, man. It's been a good chatting to you, and hopefully the Raptors do something this year and finally get to that elite status of the second round.
Yeah, well, I mean, even you know what? I mean, if it's not this year, let's just see some signs that it could happen. I mean, this is a big offseason. I think this is probably, like you mentioned it, or this is kind of a turning point. And again, another turning point for the franchise where, Ujiri's got to kind of make that decision of, do we continue to kind of build with our guys, or do we use our guys to try and, change it up a little bit? Cool. See. Anyway, I wanted to give a shout out to the site. You guys are doing some great work. There's a lot of great content on there. So even though I'm not in there commenting a lot, I'm still reading. And you guys got some great writers and some great people doing stuff. And your site is really quite cool. You would never really guess that it was sort of a a fan run or blog type of thing. It looks a lot more professional than what than probably what it should, all things considered.
The Raptors don't deserve
they don't deserve. In years past, I would have said clearly that the Raptors don't deserve the kind of support that their online community and their fans give them. But we'll see. Maybe Ujiri will change my mind on that and make me a little bit more optimistic. Maybe I'll go back to commenting on the site.
Yeah, you're always welcome.
All right, man. Take it easy.